Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff at 2:13. The Saturn V building up to 7.6 million pounds of thrust, and it has cleared the tower.
This is Mission Control Houston. We appear to have a good first stage at this point.
April 13th, 1970, 200,000 miles from Earth. 3 astronauts hurtle through the void in a crippled spacecraft, their oxygen bleeding into space, their power dying, their lives hanging by a thread.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B plus undervolt. Roger, main B undervolt. Okay, stand by, 13. We're looking at it.
The world watched helplessly as Apollo 13 transformed from a routine lunar mission into NASA's most desperate hour. But in that moment of chaos, when everything went wrong and death seemed inevitable, NASA discovered something crucial about their crew selection. They hadn't just chosen an astronaut to command Apollo 13, they had chosen a fighter pilot, and that choice would mean the difference between life and death for 3 American heroes. This is the story of why NASA's most important decision wasn't about rockets or computers. It was about the man they put in the commander's seat. James Arthur Lovell Jr. was born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1928 during the golden age of aviation. While other kids played with toy soldiers, young Jim built model airplanes and dreamed of soaring through the clouds. At the Naval Academy, Lovell wasn't just another midshipman. He was obsessed with flight, graduating in 1952 with one goal: to become a Navy pilot. But becoming a pilot in the 1950s wasn't about glory, it was about survival. Picture this. You're 23 years old, strapped into a screaming jet fighter, launching off an aircraft carrier deck at night in rough seas. You have split seconds to make life or death decisions. Your instruments fail, you adapt. Your engine quits, you don't panic. You think, you act, you survive. This wasn't training. This was Lovell's daily reality as a Navy test pilot. Every flight was a masterclass in crisis management. Every landing was a negotiation with death. And every successful mission built the mental reflexes that would one day save Apollo 13. When NASA came calling in 1962, they weren't looking for scholars or engineers. They were looking for men who could function under pressure, who could make impossible decisions with incomplete information, who could bring a broken machine home against all odds. Lovell's first space missions, Gemini 7 and Gemini 12, proved NASA right. When Gemini 7's fuel cells malfunctioned, Lovell didn't freeze. When rendezvous procedures failed, he adapted. When everything went according to plan, well, that was almost disappointing for a man trained to expect the unexpected. Apollo 8 made Lovell one of only 3 humans to see the far side of the moon with their own eyes. But more importantly, it proved he could command a crew through the unknown. NASA was watching, and they liked what they saw. But here's the question that would define history. Was Jim Lovell chosen for Apollo 13 because he was a great astronaut, or because he was a great fighter pilot? July 1969. Neil Armstrong steps onto the moon, and America wins the space race.
The limb footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man.
The impossible dream becomes reality. But by 1970, something troubling was happening. America was getting bored with the moon. Apollo 12's landing barely made headlines. Television networks didn't even carry the full broadcasts anymore. The public had moved on, but NASA couldn't afford to. The Cold War wasn't over. Soviet rockets were still launching. Their Luna program was advancing. America needed to prove that Apollo 11 wasn't a fluke. It was the beginning of sustained lunar exploration. Enter Apollo 13, Commander Jim Lovell, Command Module Pilot Ken Mattingly, and Lunar Module Pilot Fred Hayes. Their mission: land at Fra Mauro Crater, conduct scientific experiments, and prove that moon landings were becoming routine. But 2 days before launch, disaster struck. Ken Mattingly had been exposed to German measles. NASA's flight surgeons were worried he might get sick during the mission. In an abundance of caution, they made a fateful decision. Out went Mattingly. In came Jack Swigert, a brilliant pilot, but one who had barely trained with Lovell and Hayes as a crew. Suddenly, Apollo 13 wasn't just carrying the hopes of continued lunar exploration, it was carrying an untested crew dynamic into the most dangerous environment known to man. April 11, 1970. As Apollo 13 sat on the launch pad, nobody could have predicted what was coming. This was supposed to be NASA's smoothest operation yet. Instead, it became the mission that nearly killed Apollo and proved why NASA chose Lovell. April 11, 1970, 2:13 p.m. Central Time. Apollo 13 lifts off flawlessly. For 55 hours and 46 minutes, everything goes perfectly. Too perfectly. The crew is relaxed, almost casual. They've done a live TV broadcast showing off their spacecraft. Swigert is settling in well with Lovell and Hayes. Mission Control is so confident they're discussing whether to extend the mission. Then, at 55 hours and 46 minutes into the mission, Jack Swigert performs a routine procedure, stirring the oxygen tanks to prevent the contents from stratifying. 9 minutes later, at 200,000 miles from Earth, Apollo 13 becomes a bomb. Bang! A massive explosion rocks the service module. Not the gentle vibration of normal spacecraft operations, a violent structure-shaking blast that throws the crew against their restraints. Houston, we've had a problem. Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B bus undervolt. In Mission Control, the first signs are subtle. Electrical readings that don't make sense. System failures that seem random. But aboard Apollo 13, the crew is staring at a cascade of failures. Warning lights flash like a Christmas tree. 2 fuel cells are dead. 1 oxygen tank is gone, venting into space in a visible cloud. The other is slowly bleeding out. Jim Lovell looks out the window and sees something no astronaut ever wants to see: a sparkling cloud of debris surrounding his spacecraft. "We are venting something out into space," he reports with the calm of a man trained never to panic. The math is simple and terrifying. No oxygen, no power, no life support, no way home. Earth is 3 days away, and their lifeline is bleeding into the void, but it gets worse. The command module, their only way home, is losing power fast. If they stay in it, they'll be dead within hours. Mission Control makes a desperate call. Abandon ship. Not abandon as in escape, there's nowhere to go. Abandon as in shut down the command module to save what little power remains, and move into the lunar module, a spacecraft designed to keep 2 men alive for 45 hours on the moon's surface. Now they need it to keep 3 men alive for 4 days in deep space. Could the crew survive in a spacecraft designed to fail? And that's exactly what separated Lovell from every other person on Earth. What makes a fighter pilot different? It's not just courage. Lots of people are brave. It's not just skill. Lots of people can fly. It's something deeper. The ability to function when everything goes wrong. In fighter pilot training, instructors throw everything at you. Engine failure at takeoff, multiple system failures in bad weather, emergency landings with no radio. You don't get to practice these scenarios once. You drill them until your response becomes instinctive. April 13, 1970. Jim Lovell is facing the ultimate test of those instincts. His spacecraft is dying, his crew is depending on him, and there's no flight instructor to take over if he makes a mistake. First crisis, trajectory. The explosion has knocked Apollo 13 off course. They're no longer heading home, they're heading into deep space. Lovell has to manually align the spacecraft using the sun and moon as reference points, just like ancient navigators use stars at sea. No GPS, no computer guidance, just a fighter pilot's training in dead reckoning and celestial navigation, adapted for 3-dimensional space. 1 degree off, and they miss Earth entirely. Second crisis, power. The lunar module has enough electricity for 45 hours. They need it to last 90 hours. That means shutting down every non-essential system, rationing power like a submariner rations oxygen. Lovell makes the hard calls. Guidance computer, off except for critical maneuvers. Cabin heater, off, even though temperatures will drop to near freezing. Life support, minimum power only. These aren't engineering decisions, they're command decisions. the kind of resource management that separates pilots from passengers, leaders from followers. But even the best pilot can't fly alone. And Lovell's biggest challenge isn't the failing spacecraft. It's keeping his crew alive long enough to use it. Would Lovell's fighter pilot instincts be enough when even mission control ran out of answers? While Apollo 13 coasts through space, mission control becomes a pressure cooker of desperate innovation. Engineers are working around the clock, trying to solve problems that have never existed before. The most critical issue isn't power or water, it's carbon dioxide. The crew is literally poisoning themselves with every breath. The CO2 scrubbers in the lunar module are designed for 2 men for 2 days. They have 3 men for 4 days. The command module has plenty of CO2 scrubbers, but they're square. The lunar module's sockets are round. As one engineer puts it, we need to figure out how to put a square peg in a round hole, rapidly, using only materials available on the spacecraft: duct tape, plastic bags, cardboard, and tubes. Mission Control designs an impossible contraption. They talk Lovell, Swigert, and Hayes through building it step by step. Picture this: you're freezing cold, exhausted, dehydrated, and breathing toxic air. Now build a life support system out of spare parts while floating weightless in a spacecraft that's barely keeping you alive. This is where crew training and leadership become everything. Jim Lovell doesn't just follow instructions, he adapts them. When a piece doesn't fit right, he improvises. When Hayes struggles with the assembly, Lovell takes over. When Swigert questions whether it will work, Lovell keeps the crew focused on the task, not the fear. The cold is becoming brutal. With no heater, the spacecraft temperature drops to 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Condensation forms on every surface. The crew can see their breath. Hayes is developing a kidney infection from dehydration and cold. This is where fighter pilot psychology becomes crucial. In combat aviation, you learn that physical discomfort is just another variable to manage. You don't ignore it, you acknowledge it, then push through it because the mission depends on you. Lovell keeps his crew working, keeps them talking, keeps them thinking about the next problem instead of dwelling on their situation. He assigns tasks, reviews procedures, and maintains the discipline that's kept military pilots alive for generations. Sleep becomes nearly impossible. The crew is taking shifts, but the cold and stress make real rest elusive. Lovell is running on fighter pilot endurance, the ability to function for extended periods under extreme stress. As they approach Earth, one terrifying question remains: is the heat shield intact? The explosion damaged the service module, but no one knows if the command module's heat shield was affected. If it was compromised, the crew will burn up during re-entry. There's no way to check, no way to know. They'll find out when they hit Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour. Either the heat shield works or it doesn't. After 4 days of impossible decisions and desperate improvisation, would their luck finally run out? April 17th, 1970. After 4 days in space, Apollo 13 is finally coming home. But home is still 25,000 miles per hour away, protected by an atmosphere that can kill as easily as it gives life. The crew transfers back to the command module, their first time in the main spacecraft since the explosion. It's like returning to a tomb, cold, dark, and filled with the unknown. Will the systems restart? Will the heat shield hold? Will the parachutes deploy? Lovell methodically brings the command module back to life, system by system. Every switch flip is a gamble. Too much power demand and they'll drain the batteries before splashdown. Too little, and they won't have the systems they need to survive re-entry. They jettison the service module, and for the first time, they see the damage from the explosion. The entire side panel is blown out, debris hanging in twisted metal sculptures. It's a miracle they survived at all. Next goes their lifeboat, the lunar module that kept them alive for 4 days. "Farewell, Aquarius," Lovell says, using the LM's call sign, "and we thank you." It's like saying goodbye to a trusted friend. Now comes the moment of truth. Apollo 13 hits Earth's atmosphere at precisely the right angle. Too shallow, and they skip off into space forever. Too steep, and they burn up like a meteor. As planned, radio contact cuts out. During re-entry, the spacecraft is surrounded by a plasma sheath that blocks all communication. For normal missions, this blackout lasts about 3 minutes. In mission control, the tension is unbearable. Flight Director Gene Kranz and his team stare at silent speakers, watching clocks tick away precious seconds. 3 minutes pass. Still no contact. 4 minutes. Still nothing. This is longer than any Apollo re-entry blackout. Around the world, millions hold their breath. Has something gone wrong? Did the heat shield fail? Were they about to witness the end of America's space program? 4 minutes and 17 seconds of silence, the longest 4 minutes in space exploration history. Then, through the static, "Hello, Houston, this is Odyssey. It's good to see you again." Mission control erupts in cheers. Around the world, people cry with relief. The impossible has happened. Apollo 13 is alive. 3 healthy parachutes deploy. The command module splashes down safely in the Pacific Ocean. The crew of Apollo 13, tired, dehydrated and cold, but very much alive, are home. Jim Lovell never walked on the moon. Apollo 13 was his last space mission, and the explosion robbed him of his chance to join the exclusive club of lunar explorers. But in the annals of space exploration, his legacy is something far more valuable. NASA's post-mission analysis was clear. Apollo 13 survived because of split-second decisions, improvised solutions, and leadership under extreme pressure. Technical knowledge was important, but what saved the mission was something harder to quantify: the right instincts at the right time. Why did NASA choose a fighter pilot for Apollo 13? Because when everything goes wrong, when your instruments fail, when your power is dying, when death is breathing down your neck, you need someone who's been there before. Not in space, but in situations where quick thinking and steady nerves mean the difference between life and death. Jim Lovell often says that Apollo 13 was both his greatest failure and his greatest success. He failed to land on the moon, but he succeeded in something far more important. He brought his crew home alive. Today, NASA still looks for the same qualities in its astronauts that they found in Jim Lovell. Technical competence is essential, but when crisis strikes, what you really need is someone who can think clearly when others panic, who can lead when leadership seems impossible, who can find solutions when the textbook doesn't have answers. Jim Lovell's fighter pilot instincts didn't just save Apollo 13, they proved that in the most dangerous environment known to humanity, the right person in command can turn disaster into triumph. But not every space mission had a Jim Lovell in the commander's seat. Next time, we'll explore the disaster that NASA couldn't prevent, the mission where all the training and all the instincts in the world weren't enough to bring the crew home alive. If you want to learn more about NASA's most dramatic moments, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. These stories of courage, crisis, and survival remind us that the greatest adventures in human history weren't just about reaching for the stars. They were about the people brave enough to make the journey,